This is our second faculty panel, sponsored by the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence at St. Leo University. And this faculty panel, this second panel, is focused on ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. There are tons of different types of AI out there, so it's really not just specific to ChatGPT. And we have a terrific panel of faculty that were willing to engage or sort of lead this conversation today. We did put out a communication on our website that we welcomed anybody into this conversation, not just as participants, but they could serve on the panel if they wanted. And if you're ever interested in serving on a faculty panel, we are not exclusive. Would like to cast the net wide and include any faculty who are interested. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us and say, hey, I'd really like to be a part of X, Y, or Z, or I'd like to serve on a panel, or I'd like to do a webinar on a particular topic. So we really welcome that type of faculty input and participation. Well, let's start today with an introduction of our panelists, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves, and then we'll get down to some fascinating questions about how AI might be impacting our work here at the university. And I'm just going to start with who's on my screen, and I know all of our screens are different, so I'm just going to cue you when it's your turn to introduce yourself. That way we're not confused about who's up next. So Janice, you happen to be the first professor on my screen who is a panelist. So would you just introduce yourself to the crowd here and tell us what you do here at St. Leo?
I'm Janice Prince. I'm a sociologist, and I'm an associate professor of sociology, and I serve as chair of the Department of Social Sciences.
Great, thank you, Janice. And the next one up would be Zachary.
Hello, I'm Zachary Smith, just assistant professor of economics and finance, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome, thanks, Zachary. And the next one on my screen would be Frank Orlando.
Hey everyone, Frank Orlando. I teach political science at St. Leo.
And then Stephen Oki.
Hi everyone, I'm Steve Oki. I'm an associate professor of theology here.
Now we can go ahead and get started with our first question, our first topic. The panel met last week to talk a little bit about, what were their most things in the forefront of their minds to discuss today, and what were faculty really talking about and wanting to know more about. And I think one of the first things on our mind coming on the end of a semester is what's happening in D2L and what's happening in our courses, and what is it with this Turnitin AI detection tool and so forth. And so I would like to just give you a little bit of background information, and then I'm going to turn it over to the panel who will begin the conversation. And please feel free to raise your hand to contribute, because while we have a faculty panel, this is a conversation. So we want to make sure that faculty who have insights have opportunity to share those, or questions. So nobody here knew, and at many other institutions, that Turnitin was turning on their AI detection tool. We found out the day before, and Learning Design didn't know either. They had to, when they found out, they had to reach out and say, is this really happening? And it was the very next day that it was being turned on. And the challenge of that is most professors assume that anytime a university is using a new technology tool, that it's been vetted, that it's been approved, that this is a tool that we sanction as a university and we want you to use, or whatever. And that wasn't the case here. So instructors may not have been aware, of what the tool was and how it functions. So we all know how the similarity report reads. You can look at one document and look at the other, and you can make the judgment as to whether that similarity report truly did identify plagiarism. But with AI, there is no similarity report. There is just a probability or a prediction that of a certain percentage that AI was probably use to create that writing. In one of our CTLE dummy courses, we uploaded, I uploaded 20 documents, and 3 of them, and these were all documents created before AI before I was certainly aware of AI. And 3 of the 20 came back with a positive report. So that is, to me, of concern as an instructor, because I may be trusting that AI detector and turn it in, and it may not be 100% fail-safe. Now, it seems that those reports that are coming back as 100%, that's pretty, it looks like those truly are. But sometimes portions are coming back as AI, and they may or may not be, as was the case with the documents that I uploaded. So, that created a dilemma for faculty, one not really knowing that this tool had been turned on, had not been vetted. And this happened to universities all across the country. And frankly, it appears to me that turn it on to use us to collect more data to fine tune their tool. And then I believe it's in December or January, they'll actually start charging universities for it. Another thing to keep in mind is that the students were wholly unaware that we had a detection tool where they can see the similarity report or see the regular Turnitin. They did not know the AI report was there. So it's sort of an entrapment or an I got you. Now, some of us might feel like, well, you're not supposed to plagiarize anyway, so that's on you. And there's a valid argument for that. But it's important, I think, that faculty know that students can't see it. And different detection tools come up with different readings. So you can feed one paper into 5 different detection tools outside of Turnitin, and some will say yes, and some will say no, and there's not a real consistency there. So even if students feed their paper in, maybe they're gaming it and they're trying to get around it, and they think that, this detection tool says it's fine and another doesn't. It's pretty messy. The standards committee wasn't aware and wasn't prepared for the kinds of gray areas that are coming their way now. And by and large, most faculty don't have statements in their syllabi yet that define what's acceptable and not acceptable use of AI, nor did we have a statement in our catalog regarding it. So this semester was a definite challenge, on many levels, because it all came at us so quickly. And most of us didn't even hear about it, until December or January. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background, because now the next question, or the first question really is, that's in the past. So how do we move forward? What are the issues involved with academic integrity, AI detectors? What are the lessons that we've learned, and how can we productively address these things moving forward? So I'll just turn it over to the committee now, or the panel.
I think we're obviously in, I would say, the most wide sweeping technological revolution. I certainly hope of my life. I don't know if my brain can navigate anything else that is as huge as this. And so given that that's what's happening, given that this tool, if you see it that way, is here, and given what Candace just described, I say we have to, as instructors, assume that it's being used. Just assume that our students are using this, or assign it, depending on how you see things, right? Or you tell them how to use it and help them to navigate it. But I think that I believe that assuming that you'll be able to detect this is problematic. At the moment, there are areas where the AI tools that are available are not as good. So right now we are hearing, information, newer than 2021, not so good. So, so maybe depending on your course, you can say, discuss something in the last year. That's going to change in 5 minutes. So we only have that kind of cover. Numbers, I've read, not so good with certain numbers. And I saw that. I just asked ChatGPT to give me the racial demographics of the United States, and it gave me what looked like some good numbers, except there was no Hispanic category whatsoever. So it's not the be all and end all, but I'll tell you, I fed in a lot of my essay questions, and I got very good answers back in a lot of cases. So assuming that it's here to stay and it's being used, and given what Candace said, I think that's where for me the conversation has to be. Given all of those things, what do we do? And to me, that means just kill your current assignments, blow them up, spend summer learning how to use this tool, and assume that all of your assignments are dead. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but they're dead as they were. That's what I mean, as you use them, except, unless they're, I don't know what they would be, given what I have learned this tool can do. I don't know what you would have, but we have to reconfigure everything, I think, about our profession. So with that, I'll let some of the other panelists weigh in. Maybe they'll be more optimistic about how you can keep your same old.
I'll jump in. I think that the issue that I have with the Turnitin mechanism for detecting AI, I think it's unproven. I think we're right now we're in the wild west. I don't think we could take those numbers and use them to prove that students actually used AI. I think I think their detection will improve, because I've used like 3 or 4 different tools when I had a couple students in my MBA class submit assignments, and all of the tools kind of suggested that they used a chat GPT or some other mechanism to do their paper. I don't think without any other additional, I think it's difficult without any other additional support or proof. Right now, it's hard to firmly suggest that a student plagiarized. So I think right now we're kind of in a weird spot in terms of proving that students are using it, unless they just screenshot the thing and post it into a discussion question. Then you pretty much have sufficient evidence. But until we really know how these AI detection mechanisms work, I think I'd be cautious to use it as a detection mechanism. I have one kind of story of how one of my colleagues got around this, and I'll try to keep it brief. I gave a presentation to his honors class, and in my presentation, I went over investment and portfolio management. And when I was going over investments, investments, financial management, and stuff like that, I used the term mattress money. And if you Google mattress money, or if you put mattress money in Chat GPT, I'm sure Chat GPT will have problems understanding what mattress money is. And what I was talking about with mattress money is just investing your funds at the risk-free rate of return, a treasury bill, a really short-term treasury bill. So he got around any potential attempts at using Chat GPT by reframing his assignment to ask them what's the difference between mattress money and a properly structured investment plan. So I think, as Janice stated, we're going to have to do some thinking about how to, AI proof our assignments for the future. And that's where I'll stop.
I'll jump in, following on what Janice and Zach said. I think you definitely have to diversify the types of assignments you're doing. Whether it means more stuff in class, if it's an on-ground thing, or more presentations, more multimedia, things that AI is not really very good at. But I also, to Zach's point about detection, I'm really curious as to how the Turnitin model works. How is it detecting? Is it, is it like some sort of a thing where they've plugged in responses and have kind of a template and then they're applying the template? I don't know, because I mean, ChatGPT is writing how it thinks we should write. And so if we're teaching writing in a certain way, people write an introduction in a pretty standard way, using the transitions that, they might have learned in middle school or high school. That's kind of what GPT does. So I'm curious to see how it works. Of course, they're not probably going to tell us this. And also, the deeper you get into it, because I've looked at the reports for my students, it's very not very confident in its own ability to do this stuff. They very much walk back this percentage when you look into it. And I think the claim that they say on the website is it should be used to start a conversation, or something like this. Very, like, please don't press this all the way, because we can't say for sure that we've actually detected something, which is, scary for me, because I don't necessarily want to get people in trouble on something, that I'm not 100% sure on. It's not the same as their other thing. And I think that the other thing it brings up is students that, when they're in trouble because they've cheated, they've plagiarized, I always advise students to be honest and fess up and say, yes, I did this. But in a kind of a perverse way with this, if we can't say for sure if something is actually plagiarism, because we can't trust the percentage given to us from Turnitin, the only way to then get someone for plagiarism is if they admit to it, right? And are honest about it. A student that has a 20, 25%, 30% might be able to say, no, I didn't do this. Would I feel comfortable, turning them in for this if they continue to not be truthful about it? I'm not sure. So it sets up kind of a perverse incentive. And I'm not really sure until we know more about the tool and how it works, what should be done about that.
I'm going to jump in here, Frank. You mentioned what Turnitin says on the website, and there are two places in D2L where you can access Turnitin's disclaimer. One is at the very bottom of where you're looking at the AI button, the little blue button. It says Turnitin disclaimer, but you actually have to open that to read it. And it says, in short, our AI writing assessment may not always be accurate. It may both misidentify human and AI generated text. So it should not be used as a sole basis for adverse actions against a student. And then if you click on their AI writing detection page, it says, we make this determination with 98% confidence based on data that we collected and verified in our AI innovation lab. But there's no explanation about whether that's a confidence interval, what statistics they used. What does that mean to be 98% confident? There's no explanation of the research done. And then it goes on to say, the AI writing tool, a detection tool model, only highlights text that is highly likely to be AI generated. This is to help ensure that students are treated fairly whilst safeguarding the institution's academic integrity standards. We must stress that the percentage is interpretive and should not be used as a definitive measure of misconduct or punitive tool. So that kind of sets us up for, you know, if a student, you know, argues their case, it makes it pretty hard for us to say we are certain, because again, there's no similarity report. You have nothing to compare it to. Every time you feed a prompt into ChatGPT or another AI tool, it gives you a different response. If you and I feed the same discussion question in, we will not get the same answer. So it's just really hard to prove. And I did want to say, when I said the students didn't know, it doesn't show up in D2L, but Learning Design jumped on it and put a notification in so our students would know before the end of the semester. But some of you had already, you know, when we didn't even know all this was going on, you know, your students had already submitted work. So, you know, it was a sticky wicket. But again, Learning Design did try to notify the students right away so they would be aware. They posted a note in D2L. So they were proactive on that. But anyway, so thanks, Frank, for that conversation. I think that was pretty enlightening. Other thoughts on this whole academic integrity issue and how do we address it?
Well, if I may ask, you know, and I recognize that the focus seems to be on the challenges rather than both the ways that ChatGPT can be used to enhance learning. Now, I understand that right now the focus is on integrity, but there are other tools. And from what I understood, that was said that, well, Turnitin is testing, is using a test case and leveraging the university to build its database. But I think the question is this: has the university established a strategy, okay, on how to deal with the potential benefits and also potential issues as they may relate to integrity? Because we could, I mean, I hear the discussion determining, well, how do we determine whether a student plagiarized? And as I said, there are other tools. For example, a student at Princeton University, okay, actually came up with a program which he called GPT-0, okay, and he's using the concepts of robustness and perplexity, okay, which basically could tell you whether it was written by a bot. Okay, so I guess for me, again, I mean, I've said a lot, but I guess my question as it pertains to the conversation is that has the university actually established a strategy to say how it's going to move forward? One, to how we may use the bot to enhance learning, and how do we establish rules and come up with tools to deal with the integrity issues such as plagiarism?
Mitch, I think you bring up some great points. We're only going to spend a little bit more time on the whole issue about academic integrity, and we're going to move to those questions about how do we integrate it into our teaching and learning, and how can we leverage it and use it in positive ways, and that sort of thing. So we'll to that part of your question, I hope that we get some really good conversation going on about it. In terms of university policies, that's certainly outside of my purview. But my hope is that we are beginning these conversations, that we are, as a faculty, deciding what it is how we want to move forward. Instead of waiting just for the administration, I think we should be making recommendations as a faculty, as we're exploring and learning and so forth. I think anything that comes from top down is not necessarily going to be believed or bought into or agreed upon. And I think even if what comes from top down is makes all the sense in the world, I think that faculty ownership and contribution is really important. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here, and we'll be continuing these conversations in the fall. And your insight, Mitch, your contributions, your thoughts about how we should move forward, I think are really critical in all of this. So are there any last thoughts about, you know, academic integrity, how maybe you're dealing with that, or, you know, what we need to be thinking about as a faculty?
Yeah, this is Ian Gibson. I just pressing the button now to put something in the chat. I think we overlooked one thing. I noticed in my end of semester grading that there were several occasions where there were clusters of very similar, you know, typical bullet point outline submissions that made me suspicious. And in those situations, when I used the AI generation assessment tool, they all scored highly. So that correlation between similar suspicious items is a strong extra evidence of some misbehavior, I think. So each individual score you might question, and you might question their methods, but if you're suspicious in the first place and then you find that the tool endorses your opinion, I think that's a very strong indicator.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And I see, Cheryl, you have your hand up.
Hi, thank you, Candace. Hi, everyone. Cheryl Berry. If I could just speak, since we're talking about the integrity, on behalf of the Undergraduate Academic Standards Committee. So we have seen a lot of cases. A lot is an understatement. In fact, we have 3 cases, not all AI, scheduled for today. So I see some of the committee members here. Don't forget, you don't have the day off after this session. But I want to let you know that we are not going through them, and we have not found everyone guilty of a violation that has an AI offense against them. So we're being very intentional and very careful at looking at the evidence and listening to the professor and listening to the student. So we take into consideration comments from the professor as to the student's past writing, copies of their writing. What is their writing normally like? What is the essay like that they just submitted before this? Where are they at in their writing? We look at things like very rich or elevated language that would be words that I don't use, that's very large and repetitive within the writing, words like encapsulated. That just came up in one the other day. Some material is just nonsensical. You find that it doesn't make any sense. The words are all twisted, and some of it is just not factual. So we're relying on the professor. We had one on folk music. So we're relying on the professor to say, is this content real? You're the content expert, is this factual? And a lot of times they say, no, this is all said backwards or it's wrong. References are not being fooled correctly by the chat. So this one was on folk music, and folk was in the title of the references, and folk was the author of all the references. So there's a lot of things that we're using as indicators, and we're looking at the totality to make decisions. So I just want to let faculty know that don't hesitate to submit those violations. And it's good to have the perspective and other faculty looking over it and making that decision. So I just wanted to give a little insight. Thank you for letting me share that.
Thanks, Cheryl. Gianna, you had your hand up.
Yes. Hi, Candace. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Cheryl, you really have nailed, for me as a writing teacher, exactly the red flags that would, you know, send me looking. And, you know, I did have several, I don't know if we want to call them well, they're not plagiarized, they're created by AI. And they had some of those elements, Cheryl, that you've just delineated, you know, elevated language, confusing things that weren't matching up. I just wanted to share, I think on Turnitin, it says start a conversation. That's, of course, exactly what I did with the students that Turnitin initially identified as 100% AI generated. And all of those students confessed to me, except for one who never got back to me. That was on his final, and he did not get back to me. I wrote him several emails, and he never responded. So I can only assume that that's guilt by not showing up. But anyway, Cheryl, thank you so much. I think you did a great job of sort of summarizing what we're looking at.
Great, thanks, Gianna. And Stephen?
I think one thing I would add, just as a maybe perspective for getting into it, most of the time when I discover that students have plagiarized, it's often because they did something stupid in the process of plagiarizing. And sometimes it's, they pulled from an obvious source, and they pulled a very long section. I had a rash a few years ago where students would take something from online and like run it through a thesaurus, and it would change a lot of words into words that are synonyms for the words, but they don't make sense in context, or they don't fit with the discipline. And so I suspect if I'm going to catch students using AI to generate work, it's probably going to be along the same line, where it's done something stupid. And so sometimes that is, I saw an example online a few weeks ago where someone had just pasted the whole ChatGPT answer into a paper. And so it included the opening paragraph of like, as a large language model, like I can't do X, Y, Z. And so, I mean, I think it's going to be a lot easier to get away with using AI than plagiarizing, but I think a lot of times it's going to be me catching someone doing stupid. The other thing I would add is, and I think a couple of people have already attested this a little bit, but I think that I, in general, try to be and need to be more deliberate about tracking student work throughout the semester. So I have a better sense of sort of what they're doing, where they're making improvement, where they need to make improvement. And so if something sticks out as an aberration, it might just be they've made a real change, but it might also be something to have a conversation about. And a second thing that I do in various ways is essentially try to get students to defend their work. And sometimes that's like an oral exam, sometimes that's chatting with them in office hours, sometimes that's, I'll sometimes have students who have submitted work. I will anonymously, but like I'll get the remission, but I'll share their work with the class and have fellow students critique and things like that. And those sort of various interventions, I think, encourage students to take ownership of the work that they submit, which I think discourages them from submitting work they did not generate themselves. So.
Great, thank you, Stephen. And our last panelist who joined us a little late, Irene, you have some comments on this topic?
Yes, one resource that we can use to identify if a student has copied from ChatGPT specifically, I'm not sure about the rest of generative AI NLP algorithms, is the same, the ChatGPT. I'm not sure if you are aware that if you enter a paragraph or a paper that has been written recently by ChatGPT, ChatGPT will answer that it has written the specific paragraph. It doesn't give you any other information, but it does if it recognizes the paragraph, and the most recent paragraphs, it does recognize them. Then it answers that, yes, I have written that. So for assignments that they are within a week, we can use the ChatGPT to find out if it wrote them. Now, the answer is definite. So if it is possible that doesn't recognize a paragraph that is written by it, in that case, it will say, I cannot recognize the paragraph, but it is possible that is mine. But there are no false positives. If it says yes, it's yes.
That's not in keeping with my experience, Irene. I've uploaded 20 documents and there were 3 false positives. And so I don't think that is always the case.
You upload it on ChatGPT or on Turnitin?
This was in Turnitin's.
No, I'm referring to ChatGPT. If you talk to the bot and the bot has written the paragraph and remembers it, so it's
I see what you're
gonna
saying.
say yes,
Okay.
this is me.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, in the interest of time, let's turn to a whole nother topic, and that's the area of integrating AI into teaching and learning. How can we leverage it? What are some creative ideas that you might have? How might you be able to use AI as a tool for learning?
I'd like to jump in here with a little verse. Those of you who are here heard that I'm a sociologist, and basic concept in sociology is the sociological imagination. So the sociological imagination is a lens through which we view society with heightened sense. It shows us connections between our private lives and the larger social issues that often arise. It helps us see beyond our individual plight, to recognize patterns and structures in plain sight, to understand how history and culture shape our beliefs, behaviors, and the choices we make. The sociological imagination is a gift that allows us to think critically and uplift. It challenges us to question and analyze, to seek out truth and never compromise. With the sociological imagination in hand, we can envision a better world, a grander plan, where justice and equality reign supreme, and the social fabric is woven like a dream. Sorry, I was starting to giggle because I am obviously not in the runnings to be anywhere alongside Gianna, and neither is this, right? This came from ChatGPT. And I think it demonstrates how we could use it to help us in our professions. It's here, and Mitch asked some great questions about leveraging this tool. You know, here at St. Leo, we have a typically a 4-4 load plus. Even though we have small class sizes, it's still, it's a demanding profession. And for those of us who were teaching assistants or wish we had teaching assistants, ChatGPT in many ways could be, or at least can be the beginnings of such, right? Because we can use these tools in many ways to come up with a poem or a song or something that catches our students' imaginations to illustrate a concept, actually to illustrate a concept, right? Bing does all this, stuff graphically. So I think, though thinking about it in those ways, to create tests, to create quizzes, I haven't tried it, but apparently they can grade and comment. Obviously, as with the students, we have to, we've all been to school, we have expertise that has to oversee all of this. And I know there's a whole other round of issues about integrity, right, at the professional level, right? Because we can use it in those ways. But I certainly think it can be used, these tools can be used to help us do some of what might be our lesser favorite parts of the job, maybe not. But when you can get lesson plans, you can ask for activities, all of those things again, and then weigh in. I think those are ways that we can harness it. Mitch was asking, I think, too, about for the students. If we're trying to, I think it helps us to really consider or reconsider, what is it we really want students to know? Is it a list of facts, or is it, I think maybe it was in our previous conversation or planning session, or if we're thinking about Bloom, is it to delve deeper? Because if they can get that from ChatGPT and bring it in honestly, and you say, hey, go do this in Chat or whichever AI, bring it in, and then we're going to do something else, right? Think of a flipped classroom, right? And then we're going to do something else with it. Maybe you then have to defend it or present it or critique it or say where it's wrong, because again, we know it's not 100% right, or ask, well, what are the biases that you see here? Lakita, you talked about some of those biases. There are all kinds of ways that I think we can use it as a foundation, as a springboard, and then go from there. But I've been honestly quite amazed that I could, shoot in some information in there and say, write me a quiz on, I've tried a number of different topics. Now, if I don't know the topic, I have no idea whether it's right or wrong. And that's where our content expertise becomes really important, right? But if I'm teaching the class, I presume I would know that. And then I could say yes or no. So those are some of my thoughts about it.
Great, Janice. Those are some great examples of uses of it. Other folks, how are you creatively using it or thinking about using it?
Irene, did you have something interesting about data or something? I'd like to hear about that.
Yes, actually, it was 2 weeks ago that I created an assignment on data analysis. I needed to find data on, in order to have basically a visual presentation, but on data that they can teach the students normal distribution and skewed distributions and so on. But I wanted one data set that I could use the entire semester teaching different subjects on the same data set. So I wanted the variables to be related in many different ways. I just explained what I wanted, and I got a data set of 1,000. I mean, not only it gave me the data set, it gave me the code in order to produce similar data sets in the future. And this was a work that I had to work for an entire week at least in order to get the relationships that I wanted on my variables.
I appreciate it. Back to I'll take it now for a second. Back to kind of Mitch's comment. I've approached this as using Chat GPT as kind of an accelerator. Our students are going to need to be knowledgeable about this resource in the future. I've used it to create like cover letters and stuff like that, and to illustrate that they could, that rather monotonous stuff. But in my senior seminar for my econ students, I was trying to have them use panel data to analyze some macroeconomic event, whatever macroeconomic analysis that they wanted to do. And I gave them prompts in Chat GPT to kind of accelerate their research process. So I asked them to ask Chatbot GPT for a good example of a macro, or a couple good examples of a macroeconomic study using country level analysis. Then I manipulated just one word, county level analysis. And then I had them go in and select the analysis that they wanted to do. It gave them like 5 different fields to actually focus in on. And then you could kind of drill down further and further and further and get to the variables that you need to use. And you could create timelines in your process. I have a talk with my DBA students tonight. I'm going to go over how to use Chat GPT to accelerate your research process and to plan your research process out. Also, we do a little coding in R. None of my students like coding in R, go figure. But if you ask the Chat GPT how to code, like my example was a synthetic control method, because I figured out how to run the synthetic control method in Excel, and it was very cumbersome and stuff like that. But just a question in Chat GPT, and I got the synth package. Which I found the synth package later, but I got the synth package and all the syntax that I need to use to put it in R. Also, I've used it to summarize like a long-winded abstract that I wrote, because I tend to be a little verbose, and I don't know where we are in terms of the ethics on that, but it did a pretty good job summarizing my rambling and things like that. So I know that's probably, but I didn't submit that for publication. The paper was already published. I was just seeing what the tool could do. But that's my example, right? I agree with you. We should be thinking about how to leverage the technology, because if it's out there, they're going to use it and use it for good. That's it.
Similar to that, Zach, I did a presentation one evening for our online instructors just about the value of using synchronous sessions and some of the tools that we have here at the center to help support their use of synchronous sessions. And I really wanted to show them, I wanted to be able to cite the research. And while I've read a ton on it, I know the research, I know, the pedagogical, benefits to using it. I didn't have those research, those citations on the top of my head. So I fed it into Chat GPT and I said, what are the benefits for, using Zoom synchronous sessions and online courses? And it gave me about 6 or 8. And I was like, well, some of those are kind of flaccid, but some of those are pretty good. And then I said, give me some more. And so it gave me a few more. And I was like, oh yeah, that definitely captured it better. And then I said, can you cite the resources or the research that supports this? And it kicked out 6 or 8. And of course, the earliest version of ChatGPT, or the earlier one, 3 and 3.5, was known for hallucinating citations. So I wasn't really confident this was going to come back very well. But I took those citations and I fed them into our library database. I just did a search for them. Every single one of them was accurate. And when I read the abstracts of each of those articles, they were spot on. So I was able to extrapolate from those abstracts what I needed just to give some brief citations for this very brief informal presentation about the benefits of using Zoom synchronous sessions. So I can see how it could be a huge benefit to just starting your research. Because before I would have gone to the library database, I would have fed in my search terms. It would have kicked out hundreds of hundreds of articles. I would have had to skim all of those, titles, find the right ones. It would have taken me 2 or 3 hours, and it took me 20 minutes. So yes, I still had to be integrally involved in it. I still had to make the judgment based on what I know. But it's miraculously, quick. And at first you feel, I have used this expression before, you feel a little dirty because, when you first, those of us who are a bit older, when you move from a card catalog to an electronic database, you were like, well, this is really too simple. Should we really be using this? And so, but it just makes sense. And again, I'm still the deciding factor of what I'm going to use, and I have to check that and that sort of thing. But anyway, so that's my brief example. But let's get back to that question about, I think Jack did a really good job talking about how he's challenging his students to use it in relevant ways. What are some other ways we can integrate AI into our teaching and learning?
Sorry, I have my video blocked. I'm a little under the weather today. But I feel like, and you saw this in my proposal I submitted today for Faculty Development Day, I think that there's so much value in having them reflect. And I was just reading Gianna's comment about having them write from a personal experience standpoint. So I think having a research basis where, yes, they are required to provide some type of data, research-based information in their papers, but also that reflection piece. They need to reflect, and that's where that critical thinking really comes in. So that's kind of the route I'm taking in the next semester, is trying to tie both of those together.
I was just going to add that I think part of what we're doing, we're like preparing these students to be successful and to have the tools they need to be successful, whether in grad school or in the workforce. So not teaching them how to use the tool to its full capabilities would be like, in a way, malpractice. So part of it has to be that, sure, we're teaching them how to use the tool and we're giving them practice of how to use this stuff. I think that's honestly important. But I do think it brings up a question of where does using the tool end and their own skill, where is the cutoff line there? I think that, and that's something that, because my instinct is, yes, use it. But can I tell a student, you can use it for this, but not on this, without creating an artificial boundary that is a standard for me, but for not other people? And I'm curious to hear what other people think about that, because like I said, I'm with Zach in terms of let's use it. But then, Zach says, well, I use it for the abstract, which, I mean, fine by me, I don't mind. But what is the limit, right? Where is the end of where we should use it and where the students should be doing the stuff on their own? So that's something that I struggle with, at least.
Well, I think part of the answer to that, obviously we're not going to come up with a definitive one, but I think part of getting to that, Frank, and trying to answer that, is really thinking through, for our disciplines and for ourselves, what it is about our profession or about our class that is particularly human. What is it that we bring to the classroom that we don't think AI can bring? What can the student bring to the conversation or to the discipline? And I think that those are some of the huge questions I think we have to wrestle with to begin to be able to decide where that line is, because then I think that informs the answer to that, because it's grounded in a clear, at least in our maybe individual, if not collective mindset. This is what, this is clearly what we know you can get from elsewhere, but this is what, you know, for example, as an employee, right? If I think about this technology taking over my job, I have to say, well, what can't it do that I can?
But just to add a little bit to what Janice says, and I agree 100%, is I think that we need to look into the whole situation of the future backwards. So we are preparing the students for a future that we don't have the historical data to really be able to understand what it will be. So I don't think that we should be focusing on what we are going to do now for the students in order to continue learning in the way that they were learning before. I think that we should focus on how the students in their professions, in their life, will be using these type of tools, AI tools, and what they will be asked to do with them. Because in the future, we will see that employers, we are the employees, but the employers would like for the employee to take advantage of that and go faster and do more. And what we need to do is to understand and prepare the students for exactly this. So, for example, if I teach a statistics class, I may want to introduce the ChatGPT and the programming in different languages, or to compare, if I teach programming languages, different languages that I don't teach in the class. So if I teach Python, let's see how it can be done in R and in MATLAB and in other languages, because now he can, and he can do it, and he can do it fast. Before we were limited, but now the horizons are open to give more knowledge to the students, and this is how they're going to use this tool in the future in their job.
I think I would just say three things to build on what's been said so far. One is I do think it's important that we all keep track of the differences within our disciplines of how this applies. And so in theology, it's very reading intensive and very writing intensive. And so there's not like a quantitative element that I'm likely to bring in where, you know, this would be like, I would be great, you know, user for that. Two, I would not do anything with ChatGPT for myself that I would not accept students also doing, and vice versa. And so, like some of the things that are not my favorite part, like I don't love writing recommendation letters. And I know that I could actually offshore a lot of that to ChatGPT, but I also think that I would disapprove of students doing that for if they had a similar type thing they had to do. And so it's not a thing that I would do for myself. The third thing I would say is just, I guess, is a frame for how I think about this with respect to what I do myself, what I want students to do in the class, and what I want students to learn. I think it's helpful to think about ChatGPT in terms of like, when is it a supplement to learning and when is it a substitute for learning? And I have no issues with students using Grammarly, which is an artificial intelligence. I use Zotero to manage my citation. I don't type in a Chicago style citation myself anymore. I can, but I don't need to. I have a program that does it for me. And so, but those are all supplements to me doing the sort of more central work. I haven't thought about, I will think more about like, what do I think about ChatGPT as like an aid for brainstorming, for example, you know, like trying to like think through a set of ideas as, you know, a sort of board that I bounce things off of and then possibly use something with it. I'm not sure what I think about that, but that's the thing I would put out there. I'm not sure that I would be happy with someone like getting a first draft out of ChatGPT and then editing it and correcting it and expanding it and all those sort of things. I don't know how I would feel about that, but I could imagine something like that too. I was thinking last night actually about an activity I could do like in a scripture course, because one of the things I often have to teach. And you know, we'll look at like the letters of St. Paul and we'll sort of evaluate. They have common structures and features and things like that. And I could imagine having ChatGPT like generate a letter in the style of Paul about, you know, some prompt given by the students in class, and then using that as a tool to evaluate, like, is this really Pauline or not? Like, how do you know? And there's other things with, you know, what he wrote and what he didn't write, things like that. So I can imagine those kinds of things, but it's always a matter of like, how is this getting me back to the SLOs, right? Like the things I want students to be able to do when they get out of a class.
You know, we've talked a little bit about how we might integrate it into our courses, how we have to consider industry standards and the ways that our professions are moving and preparing our students for those. And there may be more insight and comment to be had on that, but also how will this impact our assessments? So let's say, and I know some people have touched on this a bit already, but if your course is a writing heavy course, or you have already begun to see the impact on your assessments, what are some of your ideas for addressing that?
I can speak to that. And I mean, this was completely off the cuff and I don't know if I'll use it again, but for the students that had 100% AI generated, and these were for their research papers, which are basically the capstone projects for the semester in Academic Writing 122. It's supposed to be a major research paper of at least 10 pages with 5 sources. You know, it's a big deal for them. These are mostly sophomores and freshmen. So for the students that came up AI generated, I not allow them to use the topic that they had initially proposed, and supposedly, and I say supposedly because looking back now, I don't know that they actually generated their own outlines or their own literature reviews or even their own annotated bibliographies. Now I don't know, because when those were turned in, the AI identifier was not already in Turnitin. So I did not know. And frankly, didn't even think about it because I didn't know that AI was coming down this quickly. So for their research papers, which were 25% of their grade, that was completely thrown out, but I did give them an alternate assignment. The alternate assignment had 4 parts to it. The first part, oh gosh, I wish I had it up. Okay, the first part was a detailed description of how they used ChatGPT. And I got about a page out of that from each of them. That was pretty interesting to me because I don't know much about it, or didn't. That was number one. The second part was discussion of how this experience would affect them 5 years from now. In particular, the idea of cheating. How would that affect them in their profession or graduate school, the idea that they cheated? Another part was, who is the person that you admire the most in the world? How is that person going to feel when you tell them that you cheated? And I can't remember the fourth part, but there were 4 different parts to it. So I gave them that as an alternate assignment, and they could only earn an 80 on it. They could not earn 100. And then I had a talk with all of them too. So that was pretty interesting too.
I had an example, kind of piggybacking off what Frank said a little bit ago, using more videos, which I know it takes longer, probably longer for us to grade videos and stuff like that. But in my principles of macro class, I teach things like GDP. I teach things like balance of payments, unemployment rates, and just the calculations of all this stuff. And we're typically focused in on the US. To give my class a more global feel, I have students select one country and they have to apply what we're talking about in class to that country. Like they have to calculate the unemployment rate, or they have to talk about the business cycle in such and such country, and they have to give a 2-minute presentation, video presentation about their particular country. You can't fake the presentation. I mean, you might be able to use ChatGPT to come up with some data points and stuff like that, but you can't fake that presentation. So I just think we need to be a little bit more creative with our assessments when creativity is, I guess, possible. I guess creativity is always possible, but whenever it's implementable, and that's it. Thank you.
I've been thinking about doing, like, I think a couple people brought this up a little bit, but like almost a reverse exam where I put in the essay questions I was going to ask into something like ChatGPT, and then give the students to correct or improve. And I mean, obviously, if they can't improve, that's not good. But I just think it would kind of be, in a way, different than an exam, because instead of kind of BSing an answer and, just putting words down, they have to really think intentionally about how to improve something. And it might actually make them think more deeply. And I think for exams, especially where it's a class with content, a lot of content you're trying to transmit, this might be an interesting thing to use, both because it shows the limitations of what ChatGPT can do, but also because it makes you think more deeply about the material and have a good grasp of the material. So I think I might try that in some of my classes coming up in the fall.
Just to build on that quickly, Frank and I and Tim Jasone were team teaching an honors course this past spring. And one of the things we did this semester that we hadn't done in previous semesters is we would, every couple of days, we would give them like a prompt for a midterm type question that we were going to have on the midterm coming up. And they would do an answer for, I don't know, 5 or 8 minutes in class on Socrative. But then they were visible but anonymous. And so we would go through, we'd have to just pick one at random. They'd read it and we would ask them, like, what does this answer do well? What could it do better? How would you change it? What's it doing well? And from when we started doing that to when we got the midterms were much, much better than where the students started. And that was doing their own generated work, but we could see this doing the same thing with, like, we could have thrown in some ChatGPT answers into the Socrative as, like, speak them in with that. So.
Can I just raise another issue completely separate very quickly? Aside from the operational aspects of doing better teaching and catching integrity violations, could we have another strand to this group to develop a notion of what other tools we would like to use? I mean, I'd be more concerned about Grade GPT than ChatGPT. I would like something to help me do grading more objectively and more productively. And my vision was that it might be rather like a self-driving car, that the instructor would still have to be supervising it and required to intervene and required to audit it. But 90% of the work would be done by the machine and done better than the human would do normally, because it doesn't get tired and doesn't get irritated and doesn't get despondent. So I would like to suggest that people could be thinking about what tools they could use just purely for faculty benefit, not just instructional design or instructional issues. The other thing is, I wanted to mention that I'm a member of the IEEE Learning Technology Standards Committee, and we are starting to discuss AI issues. So if any of you have anything that you would like me to convey to that committee, there is a very lifelong expert on AI that serves on it, and some others are beginning to work with it. So if there's anything you would like me to find out from them on your behalf, then please let me know. We meet every month on Zoom, and if any of you want to join those Zoom discussions, if I know that there's an AI issue on the agenda, I can tell you, and you're free to join. We do allow invited guests to join us as well.
I just wanted to answer to Francis, who said that he wants to try the improvement method, just to make sure that you know that ChatGPT does this. It improves its own answers. We can still use it if you ask the student to specify and address a specific issue or give a different perspective. The one thing that ChatGPT doesn't do, and I'm not sure if the IBM generative tool does, I'm not sure about that, is that it doesn't express feelings. So this is one thing that they haven't allowed it to learn how to do it. So I don't know, for some of you, I teach math, programming languages, artificial intelligence. I cannot use prompts in my questions that they have to do with feelings. But if you manage to have a component in the questions that you're giving to your students that they have to do with feelings, then they cannot use ChatGPT for that. But improvement, it's amazing how can improve its own answers repeatedly. I have used it in order to optimize actual answers to questions, answers to history and philosophy of mathematics. I have asked it to optimize its own algorithms for different languages. As Zachary said, it does it, and it does a great job. So right there, we cannot really use it too much. The feelings and the focus on interactive questions on the assignments is, I think, where we should be going. And what Zachary said before about videos, this is what I'm going to include. I teach at the different university, master and PhD students, and my students have to write their own research. And I already have started receiving papers that they are written in ChatGPT. It's obvious for many reasons, but I cannot verify them immediately. The one thing is I'm turning everything to oral presentations, because this is the only thing that I have at this point.
Of course, we're going to be faced with students who are simply saying orally what AI wrote for them. I think I want to go back to a question that we had quite a bit ago, because I don't think it was touched on from Nancy, that I think is tied into this, where Nancy had mentioned seeing some different numbers for plagiarism versus the AI. And I think that's another reason why I think everybody needs to get so familiar with playing with these tools, because in one way I see having AI as having a professional, let's say a professional parent, in whatever the subject is at home, who's writing a student's paper. I mean, before any of this AI conversation, 3 years, 4 years ago, if you turn, if you wrote your student's paper for college and put it into, and we turned it in, it wouldn't pick it up, because it was not plagiarized. It was simply written by somebody else. So that's not plagiarism, and the way Turnitin is going to pick it up. The AI generation, that's why it's a very different number. You're looking at very different things. The other question is the likelihood that it was AI generated And so really then thinking again, as we're doing, having great conversation about what we can do to leverage that to make our classes different, better, stronger. I think even Irene's idea of her comment actually about the AI improving, and it will ask you, I've played with it, to generate a different answer and ask if this was an improvement or not, right? It's learning all the time. So we're helping to teach it what's a better answer if we do that kind of thing. But even that can be useful in the kind of ways that Frank was talking about, or some of you have been talking about, where you could bring in a couple of those answers and say, which one is better and why, to help students think about that, as well as for having them generate answers. So just wanted to touch on a couple of those.
Yeah, and when I was saying about the asking them to evaluate, I was meaning it as an in-class activity, like where you give them the thing. So yeah, I mean, I understand that they could then just use ChatGPT to evaluate its own answer. But yeah, no, I was thinking about it as an in-class thing.
Yeah, I know. I was saying that an additional version would be to also in class maybe give them a few different ones that maybe even AI generated, and then have them think through. I mean, there are a whole bunch of versions of this I think we can try.
You can even give them the rubric that you would use to grade that and have them work it themselves.
Well, in the last 15 minutes that we have, let's talk a little bit about some creative ways you've used it in lesson planning. Has anybody played around with a little bit to alter their lesson plans, augment them, or create new ones?
I've been playing with it to see, let it come up with activities, let it come up with examples. I mean, I actually find the examples part of my job as an instructor often fun, drawing on something personal or so, but sometimes, that's harder to do depending on the topic. And so the idea that I could have this as an option is pretty cool. And sometimes activities, I'm at a loss for an activity. So those are some other areas that I think would definitely, I've asked for some games, and some of it has been interesting and just fun.
I have created example lesson plans for teachers because I mentor teachers, and it gives some great lesson plans, specific, and I asked the teachers to expand on them. And it helped a lot because I was able to create 25 different lesson plans. So each teacher had a different lesson plan to play with. And that in a group, it helped because I wouldn't be able to create 25 assignments for one project. Also, to answer Ian's question before, I have used it in the past, and I plan to use it when I have feedback for my students. I pass it through GPT, and I ask for citations so I can provide students with specific papers to whatever I say, because I don't remember all the citations. I just have the idea and I give them that. Feedback also can be created, and grading is something that, at least in the quantitative classes, is doing a great job. So it can pinpoint the mistakes. It can give comments to an algorithm, a program, where exactly it is wrong, and provide the corrected format. So it helps a lot with grading. This, in my opinion, will push us in the future to a different format of a class, where we can handle smaller groups in class and be able to assess the student in class, while we will have bigger groups that they work all together on their practice, because we will be able to provide them multiple versions of the same assignments very easily, very fast, and assess them very fast.
I've used it to create a hook. So I might have a lesson plan about a certain topic, and I want some way to pull students in. You know, maybe that's creating a pretest, or you know, a graphic organizer, or you know, a story that introduces the topic. You can ask it to create that. You can ask it to create a case study, to feed into the prompt exactly what you want to have happen in that case study. Janice mentioned earlier about using it for quizzing. I used it for a quiz, and it or to create a series of questions for a poll, really. And the nice thing about it is, because it is a chat bot, you continue the conversation with it. So the first 10 questions it came up with, I used maybe 4 of them, and then I said, well, regenerate, and it would come up with more questions, and then I would fine tune those and so forth. So it just, you know, none of those were questions that surprised me, but I would have had to think a lot harder and take a little more time to create all of those. So it just, those were just things that, you know, really maximized my time in creating some of those tasks or things that I wanted to get done in a class. I've also, just to play around with it, science isn't my area, but I just fed in, you know, give me a lesson plan on photosynthesis for college freshmen. And it took me through, you know, 2 days, maybe 15 different steps, provided it didn't give me the assessment. It told me what assessment that I should use or could use. And then I had to ask it, well, so give me those questions. You know, you can ask it to create a collaborative learning experience in your class, whether that's online or on ground. You know, I want to do something with small groups of 5. And again, the more information you feed it into the prompt, the more specific it can be. And you'll find that out the more times you add, you know, give it a prompt, and you'll realize it didn't give you what you wanted. And then you'll fine tune that, and then it'll regenerate, you know, a response and so forth. So it really can save a lot of time with some simple tasks with lesson planning. So other thoughts about using it as a tool for our own instruction? How many of you have used tools in a Zoom class, or, you know, you've used a polling tool, or even in your own class, but other times you just didn't have the time to come up with the polling questions? There you go. There's the polling questions you didn't want to spend a half an hour creating.
Candace, I do think it comes to like what Steve was saying earlier, or what other people are saying. I'm very cautious about, like, you know, does this feel right to do some of this stuff? Like, it feels like in some ways it's just like, you know, it feels bad, but it's probably okay. But, you know, I think, yeah, it's hard. Like, there's a temptation. Like, I just had to write all these letters of recommendation. I just had to do all this stuff. And I'm like, gosh, it would be so much easier if I just did this. It would be, but I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out for myself, like, where I would draw a line, you know, about what I feel okay with and what I don't. It's weird. It's a
I get it.
I need to get through.
You know, I've been blessed to get to teach a course that a master teacher taught before me. And she shared with me some of her content. Did I use all of that content? No, because it just didn't feel like me. But there were activities in there. I was like, this is the bomb. I really like that. And I think most of us collaborate with colleagues and share our good ideas. And, you know, I think, you know, good teachers learn from other good teachers. And, you know, whether ChatGPT is a good teacher or not, I don't know, but it can prompt some ideas. And I may not like the questions it comes up with or the lesson plan that it comes up with, but it might give me some ideas about, you know, developing my own for my specific students in my specific situation. But I get what you're saying. And honestly, you know, I gave you the example of, you know, what I did with, you know, that brief presentation for the online instructors. And there was part of me that was like, should I be doing this? But for me, okay, it wasn't published scholarship. Even if it had been, it would have only been a starting point for me, and I wouldn't have used any of that verbatim out of the tool. I would have corroborated that with the references that it gave me, which was quite nice to have those. That would have taken so much longer for me to sift through all of those library, the search responses in the library. So I think there's still certainly an element of the scholar doing the scholar's work. And, frankly, for years, and I'm old enough to be able to say this, I felt guilty about using a calculator to do long division. So I don't know. I think those are ethical questions that we really have to wrestle with as a faculty. And we won't all come up to the same conclusions. I hope that our own industry, our own professions help to define that for us. But I think that we're part of that, conversation, and certainly in our own university, we should be. But I think there are some great opportunities for dynamic conversation. I appreciate Ian's, welcoming us to have input into his technology committee. And I think we can learn so much from each other. And I think we're just at the beginning of this. And none of us are, I can't say none, but I know I am certainly not an expert. Most of us are not experts in this very unique technology, but we are experts in our disciplines, and we are going to be seeing this in everyday lives. It will become ubiquitous very, very quickly. And so figuring out our place with that, I think, is really important. I don't want to be behind the rest of the world moving forward, and our students just think we're dinosaurs and we become obsolete in higher ed. I don't, this is a bit hyperbolic, I know, but I do think we really have to keep these conversations going.
I did some reading on the Turnitin website, and they are soliciting institutions to join them as AI research partners, to provide data to them. And in return, they do promise early access to developing new tools that we could play around with. So I think we should investigate doing that. We wouldn't want to become known as an institution that provides lots of integrity violations, but of course we have that in common with every place in the world now. But on the other hand, if we can work with them to examine issues, problems and opportunities, then we might, become recognized as a center of competence on it rather than just struggling with everyone else, perhaps. But it is an opportunity to get in on the ground floor on some work that they're doing and get a briefing on what's coming next.
Great idea, Ian. Let me close by just saying a few things. First, I want to make sure that you're aware of the resources on our CTLE website. I did drop that link into the chat almost at the same time that Greg was dropping it in. We've worked really hard to put together some really useful resources on our website. So it's, if nothing else, if you just go to the teaching page on our website and look up AI or ChatGPT or artificial intelligence, you'll be able to, find it. There are literally hundreds of resources there, articles and podcasts and videos and so forth. So I hope that you'll avail yourselves of that. Also, in our end of year survey, and if you haven't taken it, please do. We really value your input about the services of the center, new ideas about ways we can serve faculty and so forth. But one of the things that we asked was, would you be interested in continuing the conversation or participating in a teaching learning conversation group, what we call TLCs? And 50 people responded that they would be interested in being part of a TLC group either this summer or in the fall. And so we are launching some TLC groups this summer. They'll start the week of June 6th. Some of them will meet once a week. Some will meet a couple times this summer. Different groups will have different ideas about how they want to go about it. But you'll find the information for that not only on our website, but Karen has dropped the link into the chat. So we encourage you to participate in that. We will be posting a list. Once you'll sign up for a day of the week and time, because there are lots of options there. We wanted to make sure there were plenty of options. But you can also switch groups. We'll be publishing the list of all the groups. And if you decide, hey, I'd really like to be in with my colleagues, so-and-so, you can switch groups. So we want you to be happy. We want you to be talking with and learning with the people that you want to be with. So, we're happy for you to participate. I also want to mention that, the call for proposals has been extended for Fall Faculty Development Day. And if you have a great idea with AI or something you want to explore with your colleagues, or share with your colleagues, we encourage you to do that. And it doesn't have to be about AI. That's not what the Faculty Development Day is about, but we certainly have had a number of proposals on that. And then we are thinking about doing a symposium in the fall, I mentioned. So be looking out for information about that. And then the last thing is, I really feel like it would be a great opportunity for us to find some grant money for revising and redeveloping some of our courses. It's a lot to ask people to do that without any funding, but if anybody is interested in that, I have reached out to Stephen Kubicek to see if maybe over in his office to see if we have any contacts or ways of pursuing that. But if you're interested, let me know, or by all means go off and do it on your own. But I really think that's a resource we need to be thinking about, is how to fund some really cool integration of AI into our courses and into our programs. But having said that, we've come to the end of our 90 minutes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Are we going to do a poll at the end or not a poll, but a survey at the end of this one? No, okay, great. We would have been surveying them to death, but we do really want you to respond to our end of year survey and give us any feedback about this, webinar, on that. And we really look forward. I want to especially thank our panelists today for taking the time to prepare for this and think about it and share with us today. And I'll look forward to the continued conversations, some this summer and certainly in the fall.